Good evening, folks, and welcome to the Horror Corner. I'm your host, Sean Patrick Erschen, and this week we are doing the top 10 horror remakes of all time. Now, I was tagged to do this by ANDREWBALLINA, and I believe originally Bronco Juggalo started that, and Drum Dums did that as well. So I just want to start off by saying, in general, I'm not a big fan of remakes. I pretty much always prefer the original, but there are a few cases where, the director really cared about the material and really wanted to do justice to the original. And some cases we did get a good film out of it. So let's get started, shall we? First, I'm going to start off with a couple honorable mentions. The first one is going to be Friday the 13th, the remake from 2009. Pretty solid remake overall. There were some things I didn't like. I didn't like the characters too much, but definitely Jason was awesome, as played by Derek Mears in the film. He did a fantastic job. He looked great. Just a great representation of the character of Jason Voorhees, I thought. Next up would be the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake from 2003, starring Jessica Biel, R. Lee Ermey. They had a really solid cast, and it was very well done. It's definitely was one of the better horror remakes of the major franchises in horror, of course. Leatherface was very well represented. It was pretty scary, had some damn good gore effects. So yeah, it was solid overall. It doesn't hold a candle to the original for me personally, but it's definitely a solid remake. Next up will be the Amityville Horror remake, starring Ryan Reynolds. I think was actually better than the original. I'm not a huge fan of the original film. I think it was very slow-paced and boring, didn't really show a whole lot. I know sometimes less is more in a horror film, but in this case I wanted to see some more, And we didn't really get that with the original film. Next up, we're going to get to the top 10. So in that number 10 is going to be the Dawn of the Dead remake from 2004, directed by Zack Snyder. Again, really solid remake, just like the Texas Chainsaw Massacre remake. It was a solid update for the modern era. You had the fast-running zombies, which was very scary and very cool. Different kind of take on the zombie genre. And it played a lot of homage to the original classic from George Romero, of course. And you had a great cast with Ving Rhames there. Really enjoyable. I thought it was solid. It was scary. Very well done. So, yeah. Again, it doesn't hold a candle to the originally, to me. But, again, very solid remake. Next up, number 9 is going to be Let Me In, which is a very underrated remake, in my opinion. It was really, really well done. It's a remake of Let the Right One In, which I believe was a Swedish horror movie that came out in 2008. So just 2 years later, in 2010, they did the remake Let Me In America. And actually it was from Hammer Films, believe it or not. It was the big return of Hammer Films. And it was a really solid remake with Chloe Grace Moretz in the title role. She did a fantastic job. The movie was very well directed. It was very scary. And I love the story. And I feel like the original was slightly better, but this was a damn good remake. Next up is going to be, believe it or not, The Ring from 2002. Directed by Gore Verbinski. I'm going to go out on a limb and say I feel The Ring, the American version of The Ring from 2002, starring Naomi Watts, was better. It's the superior version of that story, in my opinion. I have seen Ringu, the Japanese original, and yeah, it was great. It was very original, something different, very cool. But I just feel like, in this case, the more glossed up Hollywood version was actually better. It was actually scarier. It was really well directed. Some of the camera work was like amazing, creepy. I love the creepy videotape that you watch, and you die in 7 days after you watch it. So it kept a lot of the core elements of the original, but at the same time, the director brought his own flavor to it, definitely. And you got a fantastic performance by Naomi Watts. She's just a great actress in everything she does. Just an excellent cast, very scary, a solid remake. Next up is going to be Maniac from 2012, the remake of the original from 1980, which starred Joe Spinell, which I do prefer the original. It's a lot more sleazier and grimy and gritty and probably more realistic too. But yes, Elijah Wood was really good in the title role. Excellent performance, probably almost Oscar-worthy, as was Joe Spinell's in the original. So a really solid modern update. It's really gory. It's got some nasty gore effects and some great camera work from a first-person perspective of the killer, which was really cool. And it's pretty damn faithful to the original as well. So a really, really well-made remake, Maniac from 2012. Next up, number 6 is going to be Stephen King's It from 2017. Just an excellent, excellent remake, and I think this definitely is a better version than the version from the 90s, the TV movie which starred Tim Curry in the role of Pennywise. I felt like in that version, it definitely felt very much like a TV movie. It didn't have the budget of like a big Hollywood movie like it did in 2017, which definitely benefited from the better effects and the Hollywood budget. I feel like that was used to the utmost in the It remake. Now, that opening scene in the remake of It from 2017 is just absolutely brilliant, in my opinion. It was so dark, so scary, and, that first appearance of Bill Skarsgård was just terrifying, and the atmosphere it created with the rain and the darkness. Oh man, it was just amazing. So it was a much better version from 2017, in my opinion. Number 5 is going to be The Fly from 1986. Remake of the original classic from the 50s, starring Vincent Price, which I also love. There's something to be said about those old, B movies from the 50s, those B science fiction horror films in the 50s. I love those, And The Fly is definitely one of them. And it definitely has, that classic ending, which was just great. But yes, David Cronenberg's version of The Fly was much more grotesque and very serious. And had a great cast. Jeff Goldblum was fantastic. Amazing gore and grotesque makeup effects. Definitely top notch. Very well done remake. Just great. Next up is going to be on most people's list, and that is The Thing. It just has to be. John Carpenter's The Thing from 1982, starring Kurt Russell as MacReady. And a real solid cast. Amazing creature design and effects and makeup effects. The gore effects are just amazing. The movie has incredible suspense. I'll never forget that scene, the blood test scene, with Kurt Russell when he lights the match thing and does the blood test to see who the alien is. Every time I watch that, I jump out of my seat. It just sends a cold chill down my spine. It just scares the crap out of me. To this day, just an awesome, awesome movie. Absolutely one of the best sci-fi horror films of all time. And there's a few sci-fi horror films on this list, believe it or not, but hey, if it's scary, it counts as horror to me. Next up, might be a surprise to you guys. You guys probably never even thought of this, and that is The Curse of Frankenstein. That's right, we're bringing Hammer into the picture, baby. Now, this is the film that actually put Hammer on the map in horror, you know? And it's just an excellent remake. It's an excellent retelling of the classic novel from Mary Shelley. Just brilliant. I love Peter Cushing's performance as Victor Frankenstein. I actually prefer Peter Cushing's version of Victor Frankenstein to Colin Clive from the Universal version. But I actually overall prefer the Universal version, but the Hammer version is just amazing as well, you know. Two amazing films for sure. And of course, Christopher Lee as the monster, the creature, just awesome. The makeup and gore effects are fantastic. Just an amazing movie. I love it. In at number 2, it may be another shocker to you guys, Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978. I absolutely love this movie, and I prefer it over the original classic from the 50s, starring Kevin McCarthy, which is a great film as well. It's a classic sci-fi movie. I think this version from 1978 is more horror than the original, definitely. The original I look at as more of a science fiction movie. This one is definitely sci-fi horror all the way. It's very creepy, very scary. And this has some grotesque makeup effects too, and some gore effects in there as well. And you got an amazing cast: Donald Sutherland, Brooke Adams, just fantastic. You even get a little cameo from Kevin McCarthy from the original. And also you had Leonard Nimoy and Jeff Goldblum. Yeah, just an amazing cast. They're all at their best. This movie is scary, very suspenseful, and it's just creepy, the thought of these emotionless, you know, clones that come from these pods from outer space. It's just so well done. It's just amazing. And it's just terrifying, the fact that you could be replaced by this emotional, you know, like almost robotic human with no emotions. It's very scary, and that is played so well in Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the remake from 1978, in at number 2. Now, what's the number 1 gonna be? This may be a shock to some of you people, but maybe it won't be. If you guys watch my channel a lot, it probably won't be that much of a surprise. But it's Horror of Dracula from 1958, the classic from Hammer Films. That's right. Now, Dracula and Frankenstein have to be the most remade movies ever. But to me, this is the definitive Dracula. This is the greatest Dracula movie ever made, in my opinion. And I love the Universal original starring Bela Lugosi. I also love Nosferatu, which was really the first Dracula movie. Even though they didn't have the rights to call it Dracula, it was obviously based on the Bram Stoker novel. Now, this version to me is just the perfect Dracula movie in every way. I absolutely love the performances. I absolutely love the score. I love the direction of the film. It's just amazing. I love the gothic atmosphere. Everything about this movie I love. I can watch it over and over and over again, and I often do. I absolutely love Christopher Lee in the role of Dracula. I love Peter Cushing in the role of Van Helsing. Everything about this movie is just phenomenal. It's amazing, and I just can't get enough of it. So, Horror of Dracula in at number 1 in the top 10 horror remakes of all time. Alright guys, that's it. So now it's my turn to tag some people. So I'm going to tag Horrific Nightmares JM, HorrorMetal, that's Hellhound from HorrorMetal, Dave Maggot, Last Venom 76, Movie Review Time, Boogeyman Ben, Jen's Reviews from the Grave, and Horror Fan 88. So guys, answer the call and do the top 10 horror remakes tag. And thank you for joining me, Sean Patrick Erschen, in the Horror Corner. Tune in and stay scared.